Welcome to another virtual career speaker series with Junior Achievement of Southern Colorado. We are thrilled today to have Taylor Voss with us from Pueblo, Colorado. Taylor is the Director of Strategic Relationships with the Sangre de Cristo Community Center, and he is also the President of the D60 Board of Education. Taylor, we are so thrilled that you could join us today and thrilled that you could be here to share a little bit more about your story. I want to thank you for giving these students an opportunity to hear from you and learn more about your role in the Pueblo community and more about your journey along the way and how your professional career has gotten you to this point. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, brilliant. And I may have gotten the name of Sangre de Cristo wrong. Could you tell us again the name of the center?
Yeah, it's Sangre de Cristo Community Care.
Community
also
Care.
Known as Sangre de Cristo Hospice and Palliative Care. But we just went through a rebranding this year, and that's our new name.
All right, very nice. So how did you get to this place in your career where you're working there? Was it a direct route? Was there a windy path? Have you always been interested in community building and nonprofit work as well?
You know, I definitely have been. I was actually an intern at the Oklahoma Foundation when I was in college. So that really introduced me to the nonprofit world, and I think really gave me a passion for that kind of work and what nonprofits do in our communities. But it definitely wasn't a straight line to get there. I was born and raised in Pueblo, graduated from South High School in 2012, graduated from CC Pueblo in 2016. And at that point, I actually went to Denver to work for a tech startup company. That was my dream in life at that point, was to work for a tech startup. And I went up there only to realize that I wanted to come back to Pueblo, that I wanted to be back here and really have an impact and make a difference. So I came back and I actually started working with a small business development center as a program coordinator there, and absolutely loved that job, had a lot of passion for that work. From there, I moved to Pueblo Triple Aim Corporation, and that was another health nonprofit. And that really introduced me to health in our community and that kind of work. And after about 1.5 years, I actually got laid off there. Them being a nonprofit, they ran out of grant funding. And I got laid off. I was unemployed for about 4 months and was really looking around at a lot of different opportunities, and nothing really worked out. And this opportunity to work at Sangre de Cristo just kind of came to me. And I would have never guessed in a million years I'd be working at a hospice organization, but I truly believe it's a special place. A lot of special people there that have a big heart for the kind of work that we do. So I feel very lucky to be there.
I want to ask you a little bit about getting to, from El Pomar Foundation, you moved to Denver for a tech startup. So there's a big jump there, right? You're at a tech startup in Denver. It's what you think you want to do. That's the direction you're headed in. What is it about the community that called you back, or what was it about working for the tech startup that didn't feel quite right?
Yeah, it's tough. And it was really tough for me at the time because, like I said, that had been my dream throughout college, to work in an environment like that, for a company like that. I was totally focused on doing just that. And I got up there, I was working at, it was called Galvanize. It's a co-working space, and it was kind of like a Google workplace, you know, where they had ping pong, and you're co-working with a lot of different people, and they had a lounge and a bar in the building. So it was a really cool place. And in a lot of ways, I felt like I'm living my dream. You know, this is exactly what I wanted, and I'm finally here. And it was tough for me then to realize that it wasn't for me, you know, to have that dream and to finally get there and just not feel right about it. And I think part of that for me being in Denver is it felt so big, and I almost felt invisible being up there. Like I was in my workplace, I was doing that every single day, but I didn't feel like I could really have an impact and make a difference in that community. And as I was up there looking back and thinking about Pueblo, it seemed like almost a blank canvas to me. But it was a place that you could come back to and easily get involved and really leave your mark and change things in the community. So that really became my passion and driving force to come back and try to change some things that really meant a lot to me.
I think it's wonderful that you could recognize that early on in your career to say, okay, I'm feeling called back to a smaller community where I can make a bigger impact. And I think a lot of students may relate to that, especially. And we know that Pueblo benefits from the fact that you came back. We know that a community that needs its leadership to stay and to retain that great talent will really benefit from that as well. So I hope that some of our students can hear that story and know that when you have an opportunity to give back to the community that raised you, if you will, sometimes that's the right calling, and you shouldn't run away from it. Sometimes it's not right, but sometimes for the right leaders, it's the right place to be and right thing to do. What'd you major in school? You went to school in Pueblo, right?
I did. I went to CSU Pueblo, and I have to say that was the best decision I ever made. Never thought and never planned to go there, but it just kind of worked out that I did, and I couldn't be more grateful. I majored in business management with an emphasis in marketing and a minor in leadership studies.
And I know you were a junior achievement volunteer when you were in college as well, right?
I was part of our business management class with Dr. Wakefield. He had students volunteer for junior achievement. And I had the opportunity as a student to go into classrooms and teach some junior achievement classes, and just an absolutely incredible experience for me. And something that really stood out to me as wanting to be involved and work with kids and having an impact on them and helping guide them as they move forward in their lives. So yeah, incredible experience for me.
Taylor, what was your first job, the first job you ever had?
That I ever had?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That was at the YMCA. I was a referee for T-ball right out of high school. That was my first job.
Right out of school, yeah. What did you learn in that role that still resonates with you today? Anything you learned, a lot of our students might be applying for their first jobs or might be having an opportunity to figure out what they want to do right out, after they graduate. What should they be looking for when they're thinking about that first workplace experience?
For me, at that point in my life, sports was a huge part of my life and something that I was really passionate about and wanted to continue being around. So I'd say for kids looking for their first job, lean towards something you're passionate about that sparks your interest, that you would be happy going to every single day. And really that job led me to a lot of different things that, made me end up where I am today. And I think it was because I followed what I was passionate about and something that made me happy. So that'd be my advice.
Oh, I think that's really important. Thinking, okay, if there is an opportunity for me to work in something that I'm passionate about, give that a shot, right? How about trying that? Because you'll go back and it will be an experience. What do they say? If you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah,
right?
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
So you learned that early on. Were there skills that you learned from that role that you're still utilizing in your professional career today? Are the things that you learned early on that we need to hone in on?
What really stood out to me in that first job is I had a really good boss. He was somebody that was excited about the job and passionate, and I think really invested in his employees and trying to develop people and make them better. So I think I was very fortunate early on to have that right away, and someone that I could develop that relationship and learn from, and just the energy that he brought to that job every single day. And I think that has stuck with me in every role that I've had. And I really go back to that first job, and that's where it came from for me.
Thinking about energy and passion for the work and showing up every day with that positive attitude, perhaps.
And I think just people, focus on people and being passionate about people. And for him, it really stood out that relationships meant a lot. And having that relationship with his employees and wanting them to know that he cared and he wanted them to do a good job, for me, that meant a lot. And it's had an influence on me and how I treat people now in my job.
Brilliant. And that speaks a little bit to a mentor relationship, right? And having the right mentors in your life who can help set the right examples for your path future forward. So would you consider that that particular boss a mentor, and have there been other mentors in your life that have helped guide you?
Absolutely. And it's funny you bring that up. When I was just graduating college, I wrote a blog post. I used to have a blog called the Let's March blog. And I wrote a blog post about finding a mentor because when I was in college, I read a lot of books, and professional and personal development was a big thing in my life. And everything I came across said, find a mentor. And the way I approached it was actively looking, like trying to identify people. And I even asked a few, I think, will you be my mentor? And I learned that's almost in a way not the way to go about it. I think the best way to go about it is to focus on your work and do things you're passionate about and get involved. And what I've learned is that mentors then come to you. They seek you out because they recognize that you're somebody that cares a lot about the community and the work that's going on. And then they are willing to offer their help. And I think that's a more organic way to go about that. And I've had a lot more mentors in my career going about it that way, rather than just trying to force the issue and just ask random people that I really didn't know if they would be my mentor. But for me in college, that was a really great lesson to learn, that along your journey, mentors do seek you out, and they're a huge help. You know, I wouldn't be where I am today without people in my life helping me. So very appreciative of that.
Yeah, I think you're right on how important that is, right? Tell me about, so Let's March, that was a blog that you had?
It was a blog. I actually published my first book in 2017, I think a year after I graduated college. And from that book, I kind of launched this movement called Let's March. It was about passionately pursuing your dreams, challenging the status quo. And from there, I did motivational speaking. It was a lifestyle branding company. So I did that for a couple of years after college as well.
What were your revelations? So what was the title of, and I love how you say your first book. So are you working on another one, or you've got several more in the works?
I have ideas. I'm not working on it yet, but I absolutely want to write more. So
I love that. I love you. Yes, my first book. That's what I said when I ran my first marathon. I said, well, I ran my first marathon, because you just always want to keep it alive, that there will be more,
absolutely.
right? So this was your first book, and I think the title was about things you learned in college. Tell us about the inspiration behind this book and behind the campaign of yours to go out and try, to work to inspire other people.
Sure. Yeah, the title of the book was Getting Strength from My Struggles, the secret to success in college that nobody talks about. And for me, what that was self-discovery and really figuring out in college who you are as a person, what you want in life, what your gifts as an individual are, and what you have to share with the world. And for me in college, that's how I approached it. And I just felt like a lot of people were kind of there to take advantage of the moment and just enjoy the experience. And they weren't there intentionally to figure out who they were. And I felt like everything I did was to do that, and develop myself and to learn about who I was and what I could bring to the world. And that's really what I use that platform for. And because I approached it that way, I felt like I had a lot to share with college students and people coming into that experience that didn't know what to expect. So that was my goal, was to just share my story and lessons I learned along the way.
The strength to my struggles.
Getting strength from my struggles.
Getting strength from my struggles.
Uh-huh.
I love that. That's really powerful. If you dig deep into that, getting strength from my struggles. What were your struggles? What were those challenges that you needed to overcome in order to continue along your journey?
For me, they were just everyday life struggles. As I was going into college, I had a breakup, and that at my time in my life was a big deal, in high school, and really my entire life up until that point, basketball was my life. I identified myself as an athlete, as a basketball player. My dream was to play college basketball. And as high school ended, that dream kind of ended as well. And I had to figure out, okay, that's over. That phase of my life is over. Who am I? All I knew was being an athlete. Now I have to figure out, what do I want for my life, and how do I grow into that? And that took a lot of self-discovery. So that really was the main thing for me, is trying to figure out my identity and who I was. And it took a lot of time, and I think the way I approached college and getting heavily involved in activities and clubs and developing relationships with people, I think all of that helped me really discover who I was throughout those 4 years.
Taylor, let's talk a little to the student athletes that are out there,
Sure.
because the percentage of student, I think that is a dream, right? It's always a dream that when you have devoted so much of your life to a sport or a particular sport, that will continue, that trajectory will continue after high school.
Mhm.
For those who aren't going on, you've played basketball, but you're not going on scholarship to have a basketball career. What do you learn from sport that you can take with you? And what mentally do you have to do to shift to say, okay, this was this phase of my life, and I'm going to take these lessons that I learned from this and put them here as I focus on something new and different. How do you not just kind of mourn the loss of losing that dream, but really focus it and reapply it somewhere else?
Yeah, I think for me, it's kind of funny because I trace it back to one day. I walked into my brother's bedroom and he had a quote on his wall that said, "Don't be so easily defined." And it kind of hit me right there that you're more than just a basketball player. You have so much more to bring to this world and that you can do and achieve. And that was kind of the spark for me to set out and educate myself. Reading books was a huge part of my life once I got into college and stepped into that next phase, was educating myself and learning more and reading biographies of successful people and what they did, how their journey, had the impact on their life and what I can learn from them. So that was the way I approached it. Books had a huge impact on my life, and that inspired me to look at different areas in entrepreneurship and education. So that's where it came from for me. Sports were absolutely huge. Some of my first memories in my life were playing sports and growing up in a very athletic family and competitive family. I think I learned most to work hard, that if you want to do well, you have to put the work in to achieve what you want to achieve. I learned that you can't do anything without your teammates and being able to rely on them, and that you can only accomplish what you want to accomplish if you make those around you better. So those were really the lessons I took away, and I wouldn't be who I am today without sports, but it was tough when that finally ended, figuring out exactly who I wanted to be. But I think books was the big thing to help me get there.
Books, I love that. You don't hear enough about people reading more. I'm not reading enough. I'll just be quite honest with you right now. I every day I say, oh, I really want to take time to read this book. I've got a couple of books that I'm reading, but I think it's really important to think about the knowledge that you can get from other people's learnings and from the journeys of others, especially when we look at those books that are telling those stories. I'd love to learn a little bit about the role that you're in right now and what your day-to-day looks like. So what does it mean to be a director of strategic relationships for a hospital, for a hospice organization, which is, such a pivotal time in a family's life? You have the opportunity to really impact a family's life in a very unique way. As part of that experience. So tell us a little bit about your role there, about your day-to-day, and about the work you're doing.
Sure. Really, it's business development, fundraising, donor relations. That's what my job focuses on. So I'm out meeting in the community with current donors, prospective donors. I'm making phone calls, meeting with people about sponsorships. I do a lot of grant writing, building partnerships in the community, attending events. And that's what I love about it for me, is that it's all about people. That is the sole focus of my job, and developing relationships and getting out there in the community and being engaged. So that's where the passion comes from for me. When I first started this job, part of what they do for orientation is they give you a blank piece of paper, and they say, okay, on this piece of paper, we want you to draw a room, and this is the room that you're going to die in. Now, what do you want in that room? What's important to you? What stands out? At that point in your life, what do you want to be surrounded by? And I had never thought about that moment before and how important it was, but until they put it that way, that's when it really hit me. And I really understood, the significance of the work that we do and the lives that we impact and the families that we come into contact with. So it's a, I think, huge moment in people's lives, and you only get to do it once, you know, and that you have to get that experience right. And when I came into this job, my grandpa actually passed away the month that I started this job. And that kind of brought it home for me. And then my grandma actually passed away in April. And she had the opportunity to be at the hospice house. And I got to experience firsthand that care and the hearts of our employees and the impact they have, and not only me, but my entire family. So I say it all the time, I feel very lucky to be there. Everybody there is, I believe, special and passionate, because you have to be doing that kind of work. You truly have to believe in it and love doing it. So I think it's a very special place to be a part of.
How do you build community and build relationships? What needs to go? What needs to be in your character? What needs to be in your professional toolkit? How do you do it and do it well?
I think it comes from a genuineness. I think you really have to be passionate about people. You have to care about people and be compassionate, because I think if you're not sincere, people can tell that and they can feel that. So for me, that's where it starts. And I really try to, you know, focus on that and make that the driving force of what my job is just really being passionate about people and caring about relationships. So for me, that's where it comes from.
Where did you learn, if you can go back and learn all, you know, were you ready for this role because of the different experiences you've had in your life that built up, or was there one particular experience that helped you prepare more, or has there been significant training in this role that helped you in that? What do you think are some of the keys to success that you've needed to help you do well in your job every day?
Yeah, and again, I kind of look back on past experiences and being in Dr. Wakefield's class. And when I was a freshman, he said something that sticks with me even to this day. He said, "Your success in life will be determined by the people you meet and the books you read." And I really try to focus on that in every job that I've had, being intentional about developing those relationships and reaching out and meeting people and learning from them and learning from their experiences. So that's the one thing that stands out to me. Even though my jobs have been very different in a lot of ways, I've always been surrounded by great people. And I've been very intentional about trying to connect with those people and learn as much as I possibly could from each and every one of them. So I think that's been a huge help in my career, is that now that I'm in a job that is solely about people, really, I feel very lucky that I approached it that way, and went about my career, you know, developing relationships and focusing on connecting, because that, I think, has made me successful in this position.
In nonprofit, I have work in nonprofit as well with junior achievement. And when you think about fundraising, I've had some questions where I remember an interview question for this job was, your work has primarily been with individual givers, and this is all about corporate giving and foundation giving. So how would you say, you know, that experience relates? And the answer to that I realized was, all of the work that you do with a corporation, with a foundation, with an organization, you're dealing with individuals. Mm-hmm. So no matter what, you're still working with people and you're working with individuals. Is that something that you've noticed in your career as well, that there can be, you know, you can be working with Pepsi, or you can be working with AT&T in your community, but what matters is how you treat the people that are your partners. That's something I've noticed. Have you felt that as well in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I always come back to a story of the founder of McDonald's. And he was actually in a classroom at Harvard, and he was giving this talk to students, and he said, you know, "What business do you think I'm in?" And all these students started raising their hands and saying the fast food business, the hamburger business, restaurant. And he said, "No, I'm in the business of real estate." And it's because he knew what the core of what they did was the location and being in the right place. And I've always related that story and said, you know, we're in the business of people. And I truly believe that no matter what you do, whatever business you're in, that's what it always comes back to. is people and developing relationships. And that's been the very core of how I approach every job I've had.
Oh, Taylor, you bring up a good point. Studying Ray Kroc,
Right?
was his name Ray? So
Uh-huh.
studying his journey of the franchisee model is just one aspect of how he built this empire. The
Mhm.
other aspect, of course, was real estate, that he actually would own the land, and the franchisee, right, had to actually
Right.
pay him for the land. And that's how he maintained his business and really ensured the profitability for the organization. Fascinating, because I didn't know that until I learned more about that journey that he had.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a fascinating story. Yeah. When you look at your career and the different things that you've done, did anything surprise you on your journey? I mean, we talked a little bit about being in Denver, and that may have been a surprise. What have been your surprises so far?
I think the biggest surprise for me is if you would have told me back in middle school or high school that today I'd be working for a hospice organization and serving on the board of education, I would have never believed you. You know, I would have never thought that's where I'd end up or this is what I'd be doing. So that is the biggest surprise for me, is that it never goes as planned. You know, that my biggest dream was to work for a tech startup company in Boulder or Denver, which I did for a bit, but it didn't ultimately work out that way. And that's okay. And I think that's what people have to take away, is that things aren't going to work out the way you think they will, but you have to be passionate about what you're doing. You have to focus on being happy. And that's ultimately going to lead you to where you're supposed to be. And that's what I've tried to remember and focus on, that I have a lot of dreams right now and a lot of goals of where I want to be. I may not end up there, but that's going to be okay, because I really believe that day to day I'm approaching it the right way to where I'm going to end up where I'm supposed to be.
Do you ever feel like when the opportunity calls and you're able to answer, it wasn't what you set out to do, but it's where you need to be at any given moment? So, especially this position with hospice where you're at wasn't an expectation, but they needed you. They needed someone like you. They needed the skills, the talent, the energy that you could bring to this organization. Do you ever feel like maybe it was just more of a calling to get there and answer the call, really?
I absolutely do. And it's funny you say that, because every step of the way, I've really kind of felt like it was meant to be. My job at Pueblo AAA, when I went there, my girlfriend was on an interview committee for the president's leadership program, which I was a part of at CSU Pueblo. And she was there at the interview and she said, "Hey, we don't have any guys here. Can you come and be a part of the interview committee so we can have a guy representing here?" So I ended up going there, and another board member that was there said, "Hey, are you looking for a job?" At the time, I wasn't looking for a job. And I said, "Well, maybe, what do you have in mind?" And that's what led me to my job at Pueblo AAA. So situations like that kind of made me feel like it was just meant to be. For Sangre to Cristo Community Care, I was at a community event for a dinner and happened to run into my old boss. And she said, "There may be an opportunity. You want to learn more about it?" And I ended up having coffee with the CEO and learning more about the organization. And that just kind of worked out as well. So absolutely, even those two positions, would have never guessed I'd be working there, but I truly did feel like I was meant to be there for a reason. And I'm not sure why, not still trying to figure it out in a lot of different ways, but I feel, yeah, like there's a purpose behind it.
Absolutely. And I love how you really mention your role in relationship building and working with people and understanding that people come first. When you are talking to, when you're talking to students, as we are right now, and we're talking about heading out on your professional journey, what would you tell them about people? About, you mentioned we're in the people business. How do they build relationships? How do they ensure that they are really being those folks, or being that type of employee that
Mhm.
someone's going to remember and say, come back to them like they did with you, Taylor, and say, "Hey, I have an opportunity you might be interested in." How do they stand out? What do they need to do? Because we are a lot on our devices. We rely a lot on email. We rely a lot on texting. If you I would, there are people who might say, I would much rather text you than anything. But if I have to email you, I'll email you. But goodness gracious, please don't make me call you on the telephone, right? Or an in-person conversation. I mean, when we're trying to learn how to be our best selves professionally, what would you tell students about their connections with people and how to build strong relationships?
I'm a quote guy. So I always come back to quotes. And one of my favorite quotes is that everyone is your superior in some way. So in that, I learn from them. And that's how I've always tried to approach relationships, that everybody I come across, I have something to learn and they have something that they can teach me. So I'm constantly trying to develop that relationship to learn from them, and figure out how I can become better from this relationship. So that's a big one for me, is really trying to seek that out. Maya Angelou also had a quote that said, people won't remember what you did, they won't remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you make them feel. So I've always tried to be the type of person that you bring that energy and that passion and that genuineness, and try to make those around you feel better. And that's always been the way I've tried to approach it.
I love that, especially everyone is your superior. Of course, Maya Angelou's quote, I've heard quite a bit, and I love it. And I appreciate you bringing us back to it. But that's a new one for me. Everyone is your superior.
Uh-huh.
And also when you approach it from that perspective, you always have time for that person, right? You always have time. You can't say, they're not worth my time. I mean, there are certainly people that we know we want to invest in more and invest in relationships more, but understanding I have something to learn from every person that I come in contact with. I think just the humility of that can certainly help students on their journey. It sounds like you have a dog there nearby. Do you have a dog?
I do. Fighting for my attention right now.
I think it's great. What's your dog's name?
Jack,
we are, let Jack know we're almost, I can imagine that it must be hard for Jack, because I can hear him. He's like, come on, like, are you done? Yes or no? Yeah. We all, in our Zoom interviews, of late, we have dogs and children and, all the great things that come with our homes that
that's what we do. Just learning how to adapt to it.
That's right. That's a really, I love that you said that about adapting, because I'd like to go to the time when you were laid off. Sure. So when we experience a layoff, right, and especially when, there are always learning opportunities. So if you lose a job because of a failure or an opportunity to learn or something that we didn't quite get right, it's a good opportunity to go from there. But when we lose a job, when it seems like we've done our best and it just doesn't work out, it's hard to take. And it's hard to figure out where to go from there. Mm-hmm. What got you through that time period? Sounds like it was a relatively short amount of time unemployed for you, but how did you get through it?
For me, it felt like a long time. 4 months. I've never been out of work for 4 months. So to me, it seemed like a really long time. And it was a challenge because I applied for a lot of different jobs, but I also came from the perspective that I didn't want to settle. I didn't just want to have any job. I didn't want to apply for one job and get it just to have a job. My parents, my entire life, always taught me, if you're going to do something that makes you happy. So I wanted to be happy, but I also wanted to make sure that I was in a position that I felt like I can make a difference and I can have an impact in the community. That's a big part of my life and a big passion of mine. So I didn't want to settle for just any kind of job. And that in a lot of ways made it hard because I had opportunities that came up that I probably could have taken, but it just wasn't where I was meant to be. And I really believe that if I was patient and I took the time to try to seek out the right opportunity, that I was going to find something that was going to be a really special opportunity. And that's exactly how it happened. So I couldn't be more grateful for that.
Remind us, what was the next role after that?
So I started at Top Hat. It was a student engagement platform. From there, I moved to the Small Business Development Center. Then I went to the Pueblo AAA Corporation. And then I went to Sangre Cristo Community Care.
All right. Tell us about Triple Aim. What was their mission and focus?
So Triple Aim, they really focus on the collective impact model. Their entire mission was to make Pueblo County the healthiest county in Colorado. And that was the goal. And it's a pretty ambitious goal. Pueblo County is one of the unhealthiest counties in the state. But the way they approached it, which really I think changed who I am and how I look at things, was to bring everybody to the table. Pueblo is a community, I think historically we have a lot of incredible nonprofits, and we have a lot of organizations doing a lot of great work, but they're doing it separately, I think, in a lot of different ways. And they don't tend to take a step back and say, okay, we're doing this work. Are there other organizations doing the same kind of work that we can partner with and have an even bigger impact? And that's what Triple Aim was all about, was bringing all these organizations together to say, we all want the same goal. How do we work towards it together instead of doing it separately? So that's had a huge impact on me and how I approach my work now, to make sure that, you know, we have everybody at the table that needs to be there.
And that comes from that humility too, that willingness to partner and
Right.
learn from another organization. That reminds me of the situation where you've heard, all of these nonprofit, there are too many nonprofits all doing the same thing, so I'm going to start my own.
Exactly.
Which is a quote you hear people say, oh, there's so many of these nonprofits, they're all doing the same thing, I'm going to start my own. And it's like, well, that's what happened. That's why we have so many, because they're not working together. And
Right.
and I think that's a really powerful way to approach it. So in your work now at hospice, you're able to bring in other community partners as well. Is that one of your focus areas?
It is, yeah. Community partnerships is a huge part of who we are. And I think being able to seek those out and recognize who in the community we can better partner with. So I definitely have a better knack for doing that, being at Triple Aim and learning how to do that, because I really believe it's not something you're aware of unless you're really introduced to that kind of thinking. I think I'm a very competitive person, and I try to think, how can I best do the work that I'm trying to do, rather than just taking a step back and looking at other organizations and people in the community and saying, how can I best work with them so all of us can do the best work we can do? So it was definitely a mindset shift, and it's been a huge help in my current job.
Tell me about risk. Tell me about times in your career where you've taken a risk and it's paid off, or you've taken a risk and you felt, oh man, I shouldn't have taken that risk. Can you think of any risks that you've taken, or what advice would you share with students about risk and about trying something that might seem scary?
Yeah, risk is a tough one because it's not something that you're comfortable with, and I've always felt that you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And for me, a big step in doing that was writing my book out of college. It's a big risk to put down your experience and your pieces of advice and your journey and putting it out there to the world to see and possibly criticize and talk about. And I definitely did have some of that, where people didn't agree with some things I said and the way I approached things. And that was really hard for me. So that was a huge risk in putting myself out there and putting my story out there. But it's absolutely worth it. It led me to a lot of different opportunities. I think for me, writing that book, it allowed me to sit back and think about what I've learned from college. It allowed me to really think about who I was and what I have to offer to the world. So it was a huge benefit for me to take that risk. I would also say too, running for the school board was a huge risk that I had never done before, had no idea how to do it, how to approach it. Being a public servant and somebody that's involved in public life, you get a lot of criticism, a lot of people that don't agree with decisions that you make. But for me, I always try to come back to why. Why am I doing this? Why did I start this in the first place? And that's the foundation for me, is focusing on that passion and really trying to change things in the community and move us forward and make us better. So all that wouldn't be possible without taking that risk. So I would say it's tough, it's a challenge, but it's absolutely worth it.
Absolutely worth it. What do you bring to the Board of Education, being a student that went through the education system right there in that local community? What extra do you have to offer because of that?
I think I'm definitely more open-minded. I think I'm at the very beginning of my professional career, and I'm still trying to learn. I'm still trying to make connections with people and learn from them and develop relationships. Um, I'm very fortunate to serve on a board with a lot of people the past 3 years that have had a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge that they bring to the table. Um, I think I have the advantage of not having that in a way, because it really forces me to try to learn and be open-minded and talk to different people and try to gather different viewpoints. So I think that's been a huge asset that I've been able to bring to the board, is an open-mindedness and a willingness to learn. And that's been a huge help in me being able to make these really tough decisions. I also think I look at education differently. You know, I was brought up in a school system and in a time in our world that was very different than a lot of board members that are serving with me. And I think it's a good thing on both sides to have those different perspectives. But I think historically, boards of education don't have that. They don't have a young voice. They don't have someone that is just recently came out of the school system. And I think they're missing a big voice when they don't have that. So that was always my goal, to bring my experiences being somebody that recently graduated with a very different world that we're living in with technology and social media. So I've been able to bring those experiences and that knowledge to the board.
You ran for local public office. I'm assuming, was this your first election that you ran for on the Board of Education, or had you run for office before? Tell us a little about that for a student who might aspire for community leadership in that way.
Well, I was the vice president of student council when I was in elementary school. That was my very first campaign. I ran for student government when I was in college, so I kind of had that experience from there. But to run for something on that large of a scale, that was the first time for me. So the way I approached it was reaching out to public servants that are already in office right now. I had a lot of coffee meetings and buying people coffee and just saying, teach me, you know, how do I approach this? What do I do? What can I expect? What's the best way to run a successful campaign? And that was the only way that made it possible for me, because it's not something they really teach everyone in school, how to run for public office, how that process works. I really didn't have any of that knowledge coming in. So I was able to reach out and meet with a lot of people that were more than willing to help me. And I think that's the great thing about Pueblo, is that people are here ready to help. And they want to help lift up younger people and make sure that we are successful. So I'm grateful that they were able to do that for me and help me out.
What was your calling to the Board of Education? What drew you to put so much energy and effort into this, and not just on the Board of Education now, but you are the president of the Board of Education, which comes with a whole set of leadership challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But what drew you to serve on this board, to run for this office?
Yeah, for me, like I talked about before, I was living in Denver, wanted to come back here and really have an impact and make a difference. So I came back and I started meeting with a lot of different people and asking them how I could do that. You know, where do I go? What kind of opportunities are out there? And after I met with a lot of different people, they kept saying education. That's what kept coming up time and time again. And they said, if you really want to change this community, it starts with education. It starts in the schools. It starts with the kids. And I finally said, that's it. That's what I want to do. Because I truly came back to change this community, to help make us better. And I really saw that as the foundation of everything else and where I wanted to have that impact.
Taylor, that's so inspiring. I'm inspired by your words, and I'm inspired about what your next call to action will be and where you'll go from here. What would you share with students about just some keys to navigating their professional journey to help set them up for the greatest success?
I think, like I said before, it never goes as planned. It's always good to have plans and dreams and let that drive you. But like I said, I would never in a million years would have guessed that I'd be doing what I'm doing today. But I'm so happy that I am. So keep that in mind, that it's okay that things don't work out the way you think they will, but continue moving forward, continue striving to be better and to give back to the community and really make that a focus of your career. And I would also say it's hard. It's very hard. Professionally, just life is hard. There's struggles along the way. There's challenges. And I think you have to expect that, but also know how to deal with adversity and how to overcome it and how to use it to learn from it and make you better. Because that is something that I've dealt with every step of the way. Is you think things are going well, you're having a good time, trying to give back to the community, and then a roadblock comes, and you have to figure out how to get over that and how to get past it and how to become better because of it. So that's been really a focus of mine, and that's why I try to educate myself and read and learn from other people, because I know there's going to be challenges along the way, and I'm trying to do everything I can to learn how to best overcome that.
Taylor, I am inspired by your words and by your conversation and just so much of what you said. I mean, you know, it's clear that you read, of course, because of all of the quotes that you have that you can pull from and remember, and so much collective thought. And I mean, we've talked about so much today. We've talked about collective impact and how you learned about that. We talked about also overcoming those challenges and continuing to move forward through obstacles. We've talked about when you had a couple of dreams. You first had a basketball dream, and then you had a tech startup dream, and both of those dreams got derailed a little bit along the way. So you talked about having plans and having dreams, but also being willing to answer the call when another one comes, being willing to answer those calls. And I think my biggest takeaway perhaps from this conversation is about relationships and people. And when you said, in every relationship, you look at the other person as though they are your superior in some way. I think that's really powerful. If we all approach that and we're all willing to understand that there is something we can learn from every relationship and every person we come in contact with, and we're willing to learn, we're willing to be open to that. I think certainly we will be able to continue on those paths of success, build stronger relationships in our communities. I want to thank you for the work that you're doing to invest in Pueblo, invest your time, your resources, your talent, just for coming back to the community with Junior Achievement. We, of course, work in the school systems, and we're grateful for the work you're doing in the district. So thank you so much for everything that you and your peers are doing.
Well, thank you so much. And like I told you both before, looking back on my school experience, I remember Junior Achievement coming into our classrooms vividly. Those are days that I was excited about and had a blast doing. So I remember it from my own schooling. I was able to be a volunteer when I was going to CSC Pueblo and go into classrooms and give back in that way. And now being on the other end, being on the Board of Education and seeing that the impact that you guys have in our classrooms, I am so grateful for it. So thank you so much for everything that you both do.
Well, we have mutual respect and admiration here. We appreciate your time, we appreciate your service, and we appreciate you speaking to students today. And I do want to let the students know that you can visit jamyway.org and discover more opportunities online to learn more about your career choices and your path, and even how to start your own business if that's something you're interested in, and entrepreneurship as well. Taylor, thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and students, thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you for having me.